Welcome back to Gospel Kanji. I'm your host, Kent Cisco. Today, we reach the final episode of Season 2. The journey of the Magi has brought us from distant islands to a star rising in the east, to a humble home in Bethlehem, and now finally back toward their homeland. And there's one last detail in their story, hidden in plain sight, a detail found in the ancient characters used to write the name of the city of Jerusalem, Jerusalem. These four characters could be seen as nothing more than a phonetic way to sound out the name of the foreign city of Jerusalem. But the earliest Christians in the East may not have treated these characters so casually, especially when those characters were tied to one of the greatest moments in human history. And when the Magi reflected on what happened in Jerusalem, what they experienced, what they learned, and how God directed their path, I believe that they embedded that memory into the characters for the name of Jerusalem. Let's walk through these four kanji characters. Ye means father, Ru means root, Sa means to evade, and Rem means cold. Put together, the kanji for Jerusalem, Jerusalem, has the meaning the father, as Christians refer to God, root, to evade, is the cold way. This is not random. This is the rest of the story. Matthew tells us that the Magi arrived in Jerusalem asking one question: where is he who has been born King of the Jews? They had seen the star in the east. They had traveled across great waters. They had come by what Isaiah called the root of the sea. The abundance of the sea shall be turned to you. The wealth of nations will come to you. Isaiah 60, verse 5. That initial route was a warm route by the sea. It was ocean-borne. It was the maritime path that connected the islands of the east to the land of Israel. Their arrival shook Jerusalem. Herod heard about it. The priests heard about it. The city was in a commotion. In Jerusalem, the Magi expected celebration. Instead, they perceived tension, fear, and suspicion. Yet even then, they continued on. They followed the scripture, and they followed the star again, and they were led to the very house where the Christ child was. They fell to the ground, worshiped him, and offered their gifts. I believe they were converted from Magi to devout Jews at this time. You can learn about this conversion in Season 2, Episode 3. And then night fell. Matthew records it this way: having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their own country by another way. Matthew 2:12. Just one sentence. But inside that sentence is a warning and urgency, divine protection, a plan unfolding. God was not merely suggesting a different path. He was shielding his son, and he was also shielding those who had come to honor his son. The Magi obeyed. No farewell visit to Herod, no explanation, no hesitation. They simply departed. But the question remains, why a different route? And what route did they take? The last time the Magi had seen King Herod, he had questioned them privately. He wanted one thing: information. He wanted to know where the Christ child was and when the star first appeared, and most likely by what route they came. If the Magi returned the same way they arrived, Herod could send soldiers along that corridor and intercept these guys. But God warned the Magi in the dream, and the Magi went by another route home. The Magi returned by the cold northern overland route, what we now call the Silk Road today, a harsher path, a path that would take them through the mountains at the wrong time of the year, a path no one would expect them to take home. By the time Herod realized they were not coming back, Herod would have sent men to go looking for the Magi, who he thought would have returned home by the way they had come. But the men sent by Herod to find the Magi would have come up with nothing, and by now the Magi were long gone. Already moving north through the colder lands in the north, already way beyond Herod's reach, God guided them, God preserved them, and God had another plan. Jerusalem became the place where Herod tried to seize control, and God quietly outmaneuvered him. So, why encode this memory into the characters for Jerusalem? Because this moment mattered. This was an important event in the life of the Magi. It stands out to them. God the Father told them in a dream to evade Herod, and they did, and they returned home by a colder route. Their journey to visit the Christ child began because they paid attention to the sign in the heavens. Their departure succeeded because they listened to a word from God in a dream. 2 revelations, a star and a dream. 2 directions, one toward Bethlehem and one toward their homeland. 2 routes, the warm spice route to Bethlehem and the colder silk route home. Jerusalem would forever be remembered in their writing as the Father's route. Evading Herod is the cold path. Yerusalem. The name of Jerusalem to the Magi is not only a city name, it's a testimony, a biblical marker, a reminder that the Magi who had come to see the Christ child evaded Jerusalem at the request of God the Father by way of a colder route. For now, as season 2 closes, we remember this. God guided wise men from the ends of the earth to his Son. He guided them home by a different route, and their language quietly preserves this story. And here's something important to recognize. If the Magi had simply been travelers from Persia or Babylon or Nabatea, cultures that did not use Chinese-based characters, the name Jerusalem in Japanese and Chinese would likely have been nothing more than borrowed sounds, random phonetics, an empty transliteration. It would have absolutely no meaning. But that is not what we find. Instead, the chosen characters carrying the meaning that aligns directly with the very moment God warned the Magi not to return to Jerusalem is what we find. The Father's route to evade is the cold one, Yerusalem. It points to one specific historical moment. God directing the Magi to avoid Herod and the Magi obeying by taking the colder route home. The name itself remembers the event. And that only makes sense if these travelers, the ones who experienced it, returned to a land that used these characters and embedded their testimony into them. It's one more breadcrumb, one more clue, one more marker left behind by the people who saw the Christ child with their own eyes. In season 1, we traced the calling of the islands. In season 2, we followed God's hand guiding the Magi. But their story did not end when they returned home. When they set off on their first journey, they carried a certain expectation of who the Messiah would be, the promised king, the ruler of nations, the one to bring peace and justice. What they discovered and what they would later learn is that the Messiah came first to serve, to suffer, and to save, not yet to rule. Season 3 will explore that turning point, how their expectations were shaped by prophecy, how they imagined the Messiah would reign, and how encountering the gospel of the true Christ, his life, his teaching, his cross, and his resurrection transformed their understanding of God's plan. So season 3 will be the Christ they expected versus the Christ they came to know. This is Gospel Kanji. See you again soon.